We are live.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Legislative Review Committee. Today for Thursday, November 7th, we're in City Hall, 1 o'clock. This is the chair, Commissioner Carol Myers here, and we're going to start this meeting. We have our Commissioners Thornton and Culpepper and Houle here today. Commissioner Wright is not here today. And we will move on to our agenda, which starts with the approval of the Thursday, October 3rd minutes. Do I have anyone who'd like to make a motion?
We'll move to approve these thoroughly written minutes.
Do I have a second of it? Second, okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. We go on to the public input. We do not have any public in here, so I'm gonna move it on to our topic for today, and I'm gonna pass it over to Manager Nikki Jones here to discuss the new topic. Go for it.
Okay, this will be quick. The mayor has sent to committee for us to consider and develop a process for creating new tax allocation districts, TADs as we know them, or amending existing tax allocation districts. Today, we'll go through the history of TADs as we know them here in Athens-Clarke County. We'll talk about the number of TADs we have. We'll talk a little bit about the nuances within the TADs. Really, today is about acclimating this group to TADs in general, and then, maybe the next couple of meetings, we'll talk specifically about where we would want to go as it relates to the mayor's charge. But with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. McConnell and subsequently Mr. Young, who's new to the Economic Development Department.
Yes,
Oh.
so welcome to Daniel Young. This is his
Yeah.
second week as our Business Development Incentives Coordinator, also known as the TAG Coordinator.
Welcome.
So we're gonna throw him in and let him do the first part of the presentation. He'll give you kind of an overview of TADs and how they work. And then we'll talk a little bit about the existing TADs, where each one is, and the process of how to amend and or add them. So with that,
So we've been asked to meet about this by Mayor Gertz back in May. And the whole purpose is to not only determine how to start in the TAD, but how to amend one. And really geographically is what we're talking about, the amendments when we adjust the borders from this process. So just to kind of return to what is a TAD. On slide 3, thank you. So the entire country, with the exception, I think, of Arizona right now, even DC and Puerto Rico use tax allocation districts, or most of the country refers to them as tax increment financing or TIFs. They're characterized by, we'll take here blight first and foremost as far as the actual term, but that's not really exactly complete. They're characterized by being underdeveloped, or they're not developing as quickly as the surrounding areas. So one of the terms might be the buildings are typically 40 years old or older. So that's kind of something that we'll see. Now, they're redevelopment tools, and they're basically for local governments to decide how we want to look at our areas. We can identify our own areas that are in need of redevelopment, that are not progressing the way we would like them, the rest of the county maybe is. And so what we have to do is we're looking at, when we make a TAD, their geographic boundaries. But TADs really are about dollar amounts, and so they're about the dollar amounts of the property tax digest, or the tax digest. Typically, TADs are between 20 and 30 years in length. Our TADs are all 20 years, with the exception of the mall area, which is one of our 6. We'll cover all of it in a few minutes. The mall area is a 29-year TAD.
at least the parcels that are tied up in the mall TAD project right now, the remaining parcels, I believe are 20.
So moving on, some of you have probably seen this little polygon or triangle here. What we do is in area number 1 at the bottom, that's our base value. And that's basically our starting value. We're looking at that. The Georgia Department of Revenue will certify that amount, and that money is still collected uninterrupted, and it still goes to our general fund. Or when we have another locality such as school district, it still goes into their portion, still goes into their fund.
So that, sorry to interrupt, that base was set in 2020, as of 2021 on December 31st. So it's based on the 2020 values, and then the increment that's been building has been building since then.
So yes, everything that goes beyond that initial value,
That's when the original tax was created in 2021, so if we start a new one, it would be that date, it wouldn't go back to 2021.
That's right, it'll go for that tab. But if we amend one, it will also be amended as of the date it's amended, and then it resets.
yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more too. So basically we have that threshold, and everything above that threshold in part number 2 of this diagram becomes TAD funding that goes specifically to that TAD, specifically to that area. When the TAD ends, again, at the 20-year mark or that 29-year mark for those properties, all of that revenue, the revenue will continue to rise, all of that revenue and that new revenue collected each year will go towards the county's general fund. So it's a positive gain.
So it's not an additional tax essentially. The base tax continues going to the general fund. Whatever improvements that are reflected in the assessed values of that set of properties, the tax on the improved value that goes above that base unit goes into the TAD fund, but that base amount continues going to the general fund.
And Ilka, what's an improvement? What would,
So an improvement could be, if there was a vacant piece of land, if something was built upon it, then the value of that improvement, like a new building, or for example, if a building was renovated, then the new assessed value, that's above the previous value. So, you know, if a building gets a new wing added onto it, then that improvement in the value that's assessed for taxes will kind of go on.
And so that
Wait,
increment,
John, hold on. John.
So the money's being collected during the 20-year period is set to, for infrastructure or redevelopment within that design district, correct?
Yeah, only that TAD can only be used.
Right.
Yeah,
So if it's a government building, for instance, the Classic Center Arena,
it's not taxed.
so how's that working?
That's not being added to that's not creating any money.
So how is that benefiting?
It's bigger area.
the arena itself? So for example, the arena would not benefit the TAD, the development around the arena.
Development around it,
Yeah.
but any of the property, like we were looking at on that map,
Mhm.
that's all county owned.
It could be taxed, the improvements could be taxed. Classic Center is government-owned building. If a hotel was being built, the hotel could be taxed.
So like the Hyatt, that's on government property, right?
Don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. We could look it up. We could look it up on it.
All right, I was
You have
kind of curious how that was working on that property.
and we'll kind of touch on a lot of your questions.
Oh, sorry, I'll be.
No, this is great. You are getting a little bit more. So it came to Georgia, it means the next slide, it came to Georgia in 1985. And that was the Georgia Redevelopment Powers Law, and that approved use of tax allocation districts. Yes, in the rest of the country. They can be one of two we can formulate them in one of two ways. So there's a project specific, and we had a project in mind, but really everything that we're doing here in Athens-Clarke County is an area specific. The areas, again, they have to, meet those definitions, light or under development, but they can also, they have to be contiguous, which means they'll have to be connecting with the exceptions of easements. You'll see one pretty substantial when we show you a map of West Broad and Hawthorne. But public utilities, railroad owned properties, they don't count. They're allowing us to rate. But otherwise, they have to be a continuous parcel or a series of parcels. Special government districts such as the Clarke County School District, well, they have to consent. So there was a lot of meetings early on to present what TADs were to them and how that would work. Part of that is to do a school impact study. The school impact study looks at what the possible developments will be, how many jobs that might bring in, and how many people, students might come in from those new jobs, how many housing units might come in, how many families, and how many students might come from that entail. So I wanted to look at all of that.
I have a question. You look like you're ready to go to the next one. I have a question on this one.
Mhm.
Which the project-based ones, which we don't have,
We don't have.
even though the mall is a big project, but we'll forget that. If it's an area-based, you set the area, and then when things happen, then you get the, that's improving the value, you get more tax stuff. How does a project-based one work? Is that only set up when there's someone coming along who says, I want to develop this blighted area, and if you guys will make this into a TED, I'll do it? I mean, how does that work? Because you have to have a project there, like, if we're talking about moving forward, and we're talking about there's so much development going on right now, right? So, how does that one work? How do those get set up? Does anyone?
That's a great question. So the process from the state is that you have to do a redevelopment plan that basically outlines why that area qualifies, bless you, for the state code of Georgia. And some of that is underdevelopment of utilities. It might be the age of the buildings, things like that. And so for a project TAD, the process would be the same, but it's based just in that. So you pretty much would have to do a redevelopment plan quite quickly when your developer indicates that they would be interested in.
Right, but you wouldn't have, like, we put these in, these all started back, actually, like, right before Jesse and I joined, right there. Those all were like area, so if we had done a project once, they don't have to, that's at a time, we're moving forward, it's in that area. Like, would we just be adding this on as it came up, like, whoa, it's still 3%, and, anyone out there wants to do it? I mean, I guess someone could be coming forward to us now, and moving this to try to get a redevelopment plan for a project-based one. Is that correct? Am I understanding that? Or would it have to be at the same?
The way the state code of Georgia reads related to the Georgia redevelopment powers law, the process is similar for a project-based TAD versus an area-based TAD.
Yeah, but it would be set with the project, not along a time zone, so it wouldn't be everything all at once, right? But I'm just trying to understand that, because sometimes, like, the mall one seems to me like a project one, but it's not really a
It's
project.
within an area,
It's
right?
within an
So
area.
let's just pretend that the mall area TAD did not exist. And then the developer came and said, I'm gonna make up the number of parcels, because I'm not sure exactly how many parcels the mall represents. We've got these 6 parcels. We have this vision for this project we would like to do. We're interested in TAD financing. We would still need to go through the process of establishing the area as being eligible
Right.
for a TAD. And go
Okay.
through the steps that we did for the area TAD.
So where does?
But the timeline would be quite compressed, right? Because you have a developer ready to go, and then you're going through all of these, putting the data together, creating the plan, having approval from the commission, running it through the State Department of Revenue.
Okay.
Well, that part makes, because that's the redevelopment plan that it would be needed, but where does the initial money come from? Is that from the developer, like, I'm going to build a store, a grocery store?
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm being very, let's say East Athens, that's
Mhm.
what they have been interested in. And someone said, I wanna come and build it. So would the taxes be based on, what would the taxes be based on?
So are we assuming this is within the East?
It's definitely.
East Athens
yes,
downtown
yeah,
TAD?
Yeah,
So it would be similar to the mall TAD, right? A developer would come in and say, I want to build this project. This is what it looks like. These are the parcels that are located within the TAD that we're interested in. And so far, the commission has indicated that they would like to do PAYGO for the TAD. So basically, they would submit their plan. The tax assessor would look at the current value of the parcels involved. They would look at the site plans for what developers wanting to develop. And the assessor's office would basically forecast the amount of value that development would bring above what is there now. And then, but that developer would have to be willing to wait each year as they would be assessed for the value that they were
That's,
asking.
that's the question I was trying to.
Yeah, and, the malls is the same, kind of the same way, right? It's pay-go, so. Other communities sometimes will do a bond up front based on the estimated, increment.
Jesse,
So I just want to share for information, Hyatt owns the property and its assessed value has gone up almost $10 million, since 2020. So it is now worth just under 37 million, and it was worth just over 27 million in 2020. It is in the East Athens TAD. So I am curious just to make sure I'm understanding, and sorry if I'm getting a little ahead of the presentation here, but if we were to modify a TAD, it resets all the valuations. So even if you change one parcel in the whole TAD, add one, remove one, the entire TAD changes, which would mean that that $10 million increase would now be out of the TAD. And I guess what I'm curious about is like, the TAD currently exists, that money is sitting earmarked in an account. So what happens with it if we modify the TAD? Does it just sit in like a latent account that's still designated to the old TAD map? Or does it go back to the general fund, or what happens to it?
I think you did some research on this, right?
Yes. So, yes, any funds. If we change the boundaries, period, yes, all the existing TAD increment that we've saved and set aside, that can either be, continue to be applied to that TAD, or it can just go back to the general fund. But.
When we had our retreat about, Broad Street. Broad Street.
Where?
Alps Road area.
yeah, Alps, you mean,
And there was a conversation that said if we adjusted that tab, we would lose, it would go back to the general fund. That's what was said at that meeting.
Yeah, I think what I recall from that retreat discussion was we knew that there was this resetting of the value and we didn't know what that meant for how those funds were earmarked. So I think what I'm hearing now is we could just move them into the new TAD account, or we could move them into the general fund account, go
Now,
that way.
we can continue to dedicate them by choice to that area, but we can't slide them into the new.
Dedicate them by choice as they go into the general fund. You could dedicate general fund.
Okay, so it goes to the general fund.
Line item in the budget.
Gotta go back, and you'll see the balances on the sides later for.
That's what was said to us at that.
So I guess a thing to keep in mind is if we want to move forward and modify some TAD, we should know how much is sitting in the account when we do that and make a conscious decision at that time about whether you want that money to be specially earmarked somehow for projects in that area.
Yeah.
Or if you want it to just sit in the general fund like regular money. But correct me if I'm wrong, once it goes into the general fund, what you can do with it in terms of stoking private development changes, because you can only do with it what you would normally do with general fund dollars, right? So you could use it for infrastructure, but you couldn't use it for a private agreement.
That is a question for our TAD attorney.
It sounds correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's my concern, because it feels like a gratuity otherwise.
So
Yeah.
So to kind of put a finer point on an example, let's say you want to change the East Downtown TAD and we lose that $10 million from Hyatt. Let's pretend that's the only money that's sitting in there. So that's going to go over to the general fund. Well, you could decide when you do that you want to earmark it towards like sidewalks in East Athens, but you couldn't earmark it toward some kind of private development
Right.
project in East Athens.
Okay, just for our listening audience, 10 million is the raise in the value,
The
not
raise in the value.
taxes that we're
Taxes,
collecting
Oh, yeah,
on
sorry,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
And just before we go on, because I know you have a lot more slides, but following up on Commissioner Thornton's question about the supermarket thing, let's say that TAD bucket already has $3 million in it. And this supermarket is saying, hey, I have this, we're gonna put $10 million, but if you give us $2 million to help with our sewer and whatever else, we could just be using that. You could be using that 2 million. I mean, you don't have to, what's that thing where you pay into the future, you know?
Escrow,
No, but she used a different one.
Bonding.
No, it was.
Pago.
Pago. There we go. Pago. But I mean, if you already had the money, because there's a lot of these things.
Because there's background, we call it background increment, that's sort of, that's sitting there, and you'll see the balances of the background
Right, but
increment.
you
So
could-
there's background increment from all
That
of
could be used for the supermarket. that background.
If the mayor and commission determine
Right,
that they
if-
would like to use that.
We
Yes, yeah,
understand
yeah,
that.
we understand that.
I would put that disclaimer out there.
We understand that, but you know, my little supermarket only needs $2 billion for the stormwater, you know, or something or other
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Wouldn't happen, but for, what is it, not, for- but for, right, got the words right, okay.
He's new, somebody
He's
better
like-
tell him about our personality.
Get ready to
Right.
slide.
How about this job?
We are glad to have him on the team.
So how to come to Athens here? Well, in 2006, our voters approved a referendum to bring tax allocation districts here. In 2011, the mayor and commission approved themselves as the redevelopment agency, requirement in the redevelopment powers law. So here's kind of where the story starts though. In 2013, the downtown Athens master plan was recommended, and that's where kind of East Downtown, the TAG was first proposed. And as we moved on, then we had a comprehensive plan in 2018, and that further expanded that TAGs might be a viable option for this community. So throughout 2019, I'm sure a lot of you may remember all those meetings and seeking public input. One of the really neat things about tax allocation districts is just getting the collaboration from the community and getting their feedback. And that's something that we do really, really well here. So we came up with the Newton Bridge TAG, which is one of our industrial complexes, and then the downtown river district. And if you think about all those conversations in 2019, that district changed and broadened, and it's one of my favorite slides on here in a few minutes. We got towards the end of 2019, and I think part of that collaboration, that change in discussion is Mayor Gertz postponed it. So let's wait till next year. Again, some of you might remember that. Let's wait till next year, get more public input, and have more discussions about it. So as we move on. The discussions kind of resumed in May. And at that time, 6 tags were brought up, or 6 potential redevelopment areas rather. So over the course of the summer, staff prepared redevelopment plans for those 6 areas. We got a lot of public input from those 6 areas. By September, we had the Inner East Athens neighborhood. They sort of requested to be included in the East Downtown TAG, and that's a little bit unique to have residents a little bit more interested. I'm not saying that's an oddity, but it was it definitely informed how we designed those tags coming down later on. Y'all approved 6 redevelopment plans and set 4 goals for each. I do want to say that in August of 2020, Mayor Hamby really kind of hit the nail on the head when he said these are big, these are specific, and they'll help communities. And I think that's what drove the decision to bring us to all 6. And we knew it would be an all hands on deck to get staff to prepare all 6 redevelopment plans. As far as the 4 goals we all set for us, public infrastructure, economic development partnerships, affordable housing, and youth development and collective services for CCSD. Now, by the end of the year,
That slide, I wish you would show, what you just said, our 4 things are. Are you reading?
They're right there in the middle,
Let me see.
4th bullet point.
Okay. And so affordable housing is on it? There's a myth out there that it's not. But I'm saying there's
Yeah,
conversation and,
understanding.
yeah, there's an understanding that affordable housing is not on there. So that's the only reason why I needed to see that.
Yeah.
let's touch on that in a minute. All right, so in November, it was voted to approve 6 TAG districts. Based on the parcels that we did formulate those 6 areas, it totaled about 5.81% of our tax digest based on those 2020 numbers. That's important. Bring that up a little bit later too. And then on December 31st, it's always December 31st, 6 tags were formally created. Now, the Department of Revenue, Georgia Department of Revenue has an opportunity to either certify those, the tax amounts at that time, or they have 60 days. And in this case, they did take that time and they certified everything, giving us that tax base by February 2021. So moving on, great, doors loaded. All right, the mall area, it's 181 parcels. It's totaled 189.5 acres. And based on that, tax digest,
81 parcels.
That's
It
amazing.
seems like a lot, but those little condos, we'll have to go through and add them, see the little condos, office condos.
Mhm.
It seems like a lot of parcels for what is shown there,
Those numbers are based on the redevelopment plan,
yeah.
so I will double check that information.
Well, based on that,
Amazing.
Yeah.
She did all the redevelopment plans.
Well, did GIS. They had a huge role. No, that's true for Esri.
So based on Sarah's numbers,
How many parcels did you?
How many parcels?
181.
One, it's to say, there's like a lot of.
All those
little-
condos.
Yeah, it's condos.
In the pink mall.
Well, I
And then
trust you,
there's the-
Sarah.
I was gonna say.
I trust
listen,
Sarah.
I'm sure.
You can move on.
I'm sure the redevelopment plan is legit.
I did not handicap them.
and, that was actually just under 1%. That was 0.81% of our tax digest, when it was calculated. We can go ahead and move on. West Broad Hawthorne. So I mentioned earlier, there's gonna be a split, and that is a split right in the middle, and that is, one of those easements that's, Athens-Clarke County property on the north side of West Broad, and the south side is, so. That explains that break in there. 92 parcels, 172.2 acres. And based on those earlier date, tax totals, that was 0.97%. Let's see, moving on to, number 3 is one of our earliest ones, was the Newton Bridge Road. Now Newton Bridge Road, 165 parcels, 1,113.6 acres. That is our geographically largest we've had. It was only 0.83% of our tax digest at the time it was calculated. And there's a lot of activity in here. So we have the loop entrance at the very bottom of the screen.
Mhm.
And we know that, I believe GDOT is looking at 2 roundabouts in that area. Athens in Motion, has determined this area to be a tier 1 need for sidewalks and multi-use paths. And half of the bus stops in there are considered tier 3, which is on the lower end of sheltering, passengers. And so there's a lot of interesting things going on there. It's also, home to the Plaza General Fund.
What about up Newton Bridge? Cause you mentioned the lower part.
Goes up to just below Vincent, right?
It goes just past the River Vincent.
Is that?
Is that,
I think,
you want to say?
you're right, that's
Yeah,
Havenwood
Vincent
and
is
then
that,
Vincent
yeah.
and then the next one.
Syllables.
Cause Vincent's the triangle.
Yeah.
Like Vineyard Drive is on Vincent.
Mhm.
So it has youth,
Park.
technology sports complex.
That's Saxon Woods right there at the top.
Yeah.
What is that little triangle on the right, at the top?
I think.
That's not where no, the food bank's back in.
No, the river is right before Saxon Woods, so I'm trying to dig. Yeah, Saxon Woods, right? Here's the bridge with the river, that's Saxon Woods right here. I think, isn't that that's that dealership with all the,
Farm
outdoor
tractors.
equipment and farm, you know.
And then there's a couple of warehouses, like a bin warehouse, something like that.
And we're anticipating, housing development, right?
Yes, 1125.
The DR Horton thing, right? That's right there.
Okay.
All right. Going on to downtown.
Daniel, back on the other one,
Sure.
in the bottom right-hand corner, why is that stuff? You know, the
It's
bottom,
just carried over.
Oh,
okay, okay,
Screen grab.
okay, that's all right.
Okay.
That's a different tab. It's not one of those big right away.
that's why it's a different color.
Yeah. I like it.
It's actually.
Here's the.
Okay,
It's actually this one.
Puzzle.
yeah.
So, number 4 is 220 parcels, 236.1 acres, and East Downtown's, amount was actually 1.89% of the tax digest based on the 2020 redevelopment plan. This was the first TAD so far to receive your, or the mayor and commission's approval for the priority list. And, Commissioner Thornton, to your point, the, priority list, their primary priority 40%, 40% was applied toward affordable housing. So that's what they recommend.
Okay.
This is also the first time to receive an amendment. Now, I mentioned, we're talking about the amendments about changing geography. This amendment that I'm about to mention was just about allocating funds. And so, in June, it was approved to designate 70% of the funds. And you click, this is my favorite slide.
Oh, where?
It doesn't get better than this.
What?
Quite a bill.
Click.
Whoa, what's going on?
Did it do it?
No.
No, it didn't do it.
Well, I like, something's happening.
The river's supposed to show that. So 70% of funds are gonna be assigned to redevelopment west of the North Oconee River. And 30%
What happened?
to the east. Yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
Try, Daniel.
I will.
The rivers, right? Well, these are the.
Yeah.
This is the river, so the rest of the river is from here over.
And that's where the 70%'s going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did my TAG group has not met yet, so the TAG advisory, usury, whatever you wanna call them,
Advisory.
committee, did they select the percentages or did staff?
No, the committee's job as part of the redevelopment plan is to select the percentages as part of their process. So each one of them is, you'll see where we are for each one.
Okay.
Each one is going through, you'll see we've got it outlined, there's a community input process. And then each committee takes the community input and goes through a series of discussions. They create sort of a priority list of different projects that the community says they're interested in, themed by those 4 goals that y'all said. And then they assign a percentage, they add up to 100% for each of the 4 goals.
And those are recommended percentages to
Right.
us.
And it is, everything's a recommendation, right?
Every-
The list, the percentages are recommended.
Calm about having to come before.
Well, I do,
Yeah. They're recommended and then
Yeah.
y'all review them and can vote to accept them.
Okay.
And when we brought the first priority list for East Athens, wasn't there a little bit of movement in the priorities or did they accept them as is?
They moved it,
That's what I thought.
Commissioner Taylor made a change.
Correct. That's right.
Moving on to North Avenue.
Yay.
Okay.
North Avenue is 68 parcels, 139.6. And it is 0.36%.
How many acres did you say?
139 and a half.
Thank you. And I'll tell you the myth on that story.
Mhm.
North Avenue, it was told to me that, we only could identify a TAG up into the bypass because it was urban. And they did not do, TAGs did not cover rural areas. So. just that out.
Is that true? Or is that just a myth?
It's,
Yeah,
it's a
like-
myth now. It wasn't a myth when somebody told me that and I
Okay.
went for it.
The Lexington Road one is all, that's right outside the bypass.
Yeah, you can put
As long as you
The-
can make
the
the
nor-
case
actually, the
for
new
the
village.
criteria for a redevelopment plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
Since 1985, they've allowed for more rural areas to be included.
Okay.
Since the road. That's the one that got me interested in this all. 309 parcels, 393.7 acres. This is just shy of 1% of that 2020 tax digest value, so it's 0.94%. Let's see, so right now, Lexington Road has full funding to, well, I hope you all know that there's the GDOT project. The ramps, which have been wonderful for me. The south side of Lexington Road is fully funded with a sidewalk project. And this one expands up Cherokee Road up to about the intersection with Beaver Dam. So there's a lot of opportunities here.
But Daniel, those are SPLOST projects. Those are not TAD funded.
There's,
Not
so-
TAD funded.
They could be TAD supplemental.
there you go, there's a lot of projects.
It's a,
Yeah, leverage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of projects already going on in that area. It's saying that's for the
Yes.
such could be supplements supported and expanded on.
So you were talking about how many parcels were in each one? So 2020 is when these started. So all those parcels, the tax, assessed value stated that. All right? All those parcels within that area.
What, no, the value at that time is still coming to our general fund. And then the value that risen.
Right.
Is going to that.
Okay. So the homeowners or the individual owners, they don't see, I mean, their taxes did not stop.
Right,
Their prices are still going up.
it's not an additional tax, other than if the value of their property is going up.
So are you gonna show us a balance in each tax?
Yes,
Okay.
those are coming.
All right, so. I said earlier, one of the eight things.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
yeah, whatever that, yeah, that's.
February what?
Okay, yeah.
So in April of 21, we wrote some ordinances, which actually created the 6 TAD advisory committees. And so we're gonna make another, and we're gonna stack TACs. So one for each TAD area. And we also have the all redevelopment. By November of 21, Mayor Gerst began to announce, because he has the authority to appoint all those members. So that started at that time. And ever since then, the TACs have been gathering together. We've been gathering public input in both surveys and open houses. And we've been preparing with recommendations.
That's like a 43 million increase. Wow. Atlas,
I'll talk us through this one.
43 million.
So, as Daniel mentioned, we have 6 of them plus 1 for the MARC because the Clarke County School District voted to participate in the MARC. They have a committee. The mayor appoints the members. Right now, there are 41 members and each serve 3-year terms. We've got them staggered. 3 committees have 5 members. Those are due to some vacancies that are on them right now. 3 of them have 7 members. And then the MARC has 5 members. 3 are from the mayor and commission and 2 are from the Board of Ed. The regular meeting schedules are determined by the committees. It really depends on the committee right now and where they are as far as the orientation process. It takes quite a while to orient these committees just because it takes a while to figure out like how much does infrastructure cost and what does the land use plan look like and what does the comp plan for this area look like? It's basically kind of a crash course in local government and local government infrastructure. One of the findings of the Office of Operational Analysis of our department earlier this year found that because we have those 7 committees, very few have completed any of the trainings. It's just difficult for people to have time when they're volunteering to go through this hours of training. And we've also been challenged by a lack of quorums. North Avenue in particular, we've had a really hard time just to get people there, but other committees as well. It's just difficult. People are very busy.
I will say this, and as a commissioner for my district, if you're having a problem, I wish somebody would just let me know, because the mayor, I know the mayor appointed the committee, but he did ask me, so the folk that he asked me about, I need to make sure that they show up or we need to replace them. And one did move out, and I only found that out because I rode by our house.
I have 2 questions on that. One is, the TAD tax. Is that a state requirement or is that a ACC?
ACC Go.
It's
Creation.
easy
Okay,
for
that's fine.
climate.
And the other thing, I'm just gonna say this because of the back training, because I did that when I was on the audit committee because we were starting a new committee and, the other members were doing it. It's not that, I mean, it's about I've done a lot of development training online as a state employee that's like, okay, it's a waste of time. But it was really about parliamentary procedure, about what's going on. I found it helpful. So it bothers me that we can't get, people, I'm just really, I mean, that's a little aside, but maybe that GOC is looking at that, like how many people are actually doing the training? Cause can't do the training,
Well,
that,
41 of those folks, so there's 41 folks.
Fully staffed it's 47, because state
Yeah,
content
yeah,
is 42
yeah.
plus 5 is 47.
And I would offer that probably at least 3 of those folks serve on a different board or your commission within our
yeah,
local government, and maybe even more. So we see that quite a bit when we have the same folks serving on boards, because there's only a handful of folks who have the time or the interest
right.
in all of these things.
Well, they did not call me for nothing anymore.
Maybe we should make a rule about that.
GOC's looking at it right now, so they have a topic right now to basically review our VACs, process, ordinances, shared it up and then those meetings. So they are looking at like what are the requirements as it pertains to training, and how that would be enforced and communicated.
Yeah, and that seems that would better represent the community if you have different people on different, instead of the same people and everything.
Yeah, that's like a piece of the whole big VAC.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
we'll let GOC work on that.
yeah.
I'm ready for the next slide.
Okay.
So here's sort of the process is that, public input informs those community identified priority recommendations that y'all receive, both the lists and the percentage of fundings that are recommended. So this kind of just goes through the process of how we're notifying the community when we're having public input meetings or surveys that are going out related to the TADs. And then the TACs, those committees, take all the findings from the online surveys and the in-person meetings. And a lot of times members of the advisory committee are attending the public meetings. So they're in there too, hosting their neighbors and hearing the input firsthand as well. And then they go through and they are creating project lists that are sorted by those 4: affordable housing, partnerships, CCST and youth development, and public infrastructure. And then they're recommending funding percentages as they're charged with as part of the redevelopment plans. And then those come to you as agenda items. And in this way, those recommendations reflect the unique needs for each of the TADs, since there's 6 of them and they're all a little bit different. And the next slide will show, it's kind of a summary slide. Here's how the process works.
Can y'all email us this too?
Ready for the next one? So we'll go through each one really quick and give you an update. In the right corner, you can see the current balance of the increment that is in. So East Town is the furthest along right now. Y'all have voted upon their recommendations. And the next step is to start researching those top priorities. To Commissioner Myers's point, figure out if there are ways to leverage with other things that are happening that align with those priorities. And then also to involve our teammates, TPW or public utilities or housing and community development. So that's East Downtown. The Newton Bridge TAD, you will have an item coming up to you later this month in the agenda setting meeting. They have put together their recommendation. I'll give you a spoiler. Their recommendation is 100% towards public infrastructure. They're very interested and very passionate about public safety on the roadways in Newton Bridge and slowing the traffic down through there. So that's one thing you'll see. It'll be on the November-December cycle. And you can see their balance in the upper right corner. Lexington Road has been through community input sessions and the online survey. They've had one meeting to start looking at the public input, and they have another one coming up next week.
December 12th.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a pause with staff transition. So Lexington has a baby, they just need to continue their conversation. The mall area has been through community input sessions and an online survey, and they also are coming up pretty soon for their discussion and priority meetings.
First half December.
Yeah, the first half of December, so I appreciate Daniel, he really has, jumped in, gotten in touch with all the 6 tabs and has been, getting things rolling again. And you can see the tab for the background increment balance up there, and that's the right-hand corner. West Broad and Hawthorne, that's the next one that, we need to do community input sessions and the online survey for, so that one will be coming up in the next several months. North Avenue, same thing. So those are the last 2 that we need to do, the community input sessions and online surveys, like gathering of information for. Okay.
So there's a deposit that goes into these accounts once a year when property taxes are paid, is that right? Or if people's property taxes are in escrow. Well, if they're in escrow, the bank's paying it then, and you're paying the bank back, all right? But y'all get a deposit goes into these accounts once a year when property taxes are due.
You know, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. That's a question for finance. I know that we receive every month as part of our monthly budget reports.
Does
But
that
I'm
change
not
monthly?
watching to see if the balances are changing, you know, I just kind of keep an eye on them, and that's how we're kind of pulling them.
I think it is annual, but we can.
They have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
it's
can-
Because if you pay your taxes in escrow, you're paying the
Yeah,
bank.
we get a little
Right.
each month, yeah.
So are there projections for each of these? Or they just did that for the mall because of that specific project?
Yeah, I would think on the whole for the Board of Assessors, it's probably based on overall percentage of past growth and not on the parcel level. Unless they know a new project's coming in and they know it's gonna add this many square feet of this type of space.
Well, if North Avenue approves a housing project that, do we approve that last time? We did.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Affordable housing.
We can get a projection of what that new project would put into the tab. We should be able to project from
At least a little estimate, right? I mean, yeah.
if Sarah says it, it's done.
When they go through the plans review, we'll
Yeah.
have an understanding.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
okay.
And we just, I just had my colleague here look up the Atlas, project on
Oh, yeah.
Lexington Road.
Yeah.
But that assessed value went up to $44 million
Yeah,
from, what was it, like,
it went from 1 million to 44.
And that one's really dramatic because it was a
Holy cow.
greenfield, right? There was nothing there,
Right.
so anything is gonna be a
but
lot,
that
right?
one on North Avenue
Is the green-
is the greenfield.
Those
But that's-
things as well.
But that's Lexington Road.
Yeah,
It may be worth noting that that's in a TAD and there was this, just, when that development got approved, there was a pitch for them to come back to us to ask for money for affordable housing. And the Atlas developers.
well, actually, the Atlas project did come through with the TAB request. They
That-
did have, that was our
that's-
first TAB
that's-
application that came through, and the committee recommended denial, and then the mayor and commission
That's where I was going with this.
denied, yeah, to deny it.
That before we had formalized more, they had gotten that development approved and then they came back with a TAD request for affordable housing and the commission denied that request.
We,
But that was a,
We probably don't understand it.
no, that's not the case, that we understood it.
Oh, okay.
No, they do have affordable housing in the front of that as is. Okay,
That
that
was
that
very
was,
controversial.
that was right at the start of,
And it was very controversial.
yeah.
So, sorry. So you're going from 1 million to 44 million. What percentage of, what is the dollar value that we are collecting?
The millage rate, right? The millage rate
So
is the change in value.
Well, it all equals up to, what was it on I mean, that's the problem.
Well,
893.
It's not all
From
I know.
there, but
But so
I've had
that,
a lot
that
of.
800, that number includes that.
It includes.
Yeah, it
Atlas.
includes that, and that's why that one is higher than
So it's
the
really a
others.
slow,
Right,
It is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not.
right.
Trying to get rich quick.
Right.
So as you might think for Lexington and Newton Bridge, also you'll see the flats at Newton Bridge at general time, that will hit the digest. I would think in this coming, you know, there's a little bit of a lag between the time that it's built and then it's assessed and then it hits the digest.
Mhm.
But the Atlas project has already gone through that period, so that's how you're seeing it in the last one. So Newton Bridge, the Flats is another large project that's gone in. And then the housing complex that's a little further up, right next to Holland Park, in a year or two, once they've built it, and then it gets assessed, and then it will hit the digest.
So the flats was just completed this year, right? So we should see the benefits of that, the next assessment.
So the bill that just passed, freezing, or your tax assessment can only go up the rate of inflation.
For homesteaders,
That's just homestead, so that, I mean, that's not gonna affect this at all, is it? Will that reduce the amount of tax revenue? Because the assessments
On single family homes, so that's a good question. Multifamily, commercial,
okay, so that's just on single family.
And probably not for the first year of a single family neighborhood, right? Because that's just the bump from, the one I'm thinking about is Newton Bridge, because it'll go from Greenfield.
So that one,
Okay.
well, you can get deep in the weeds, and this is a lot of information.
I know it's trying to say.
It's exciting. I think we're gonna finally find out what excites you. He's usually so quiet, you know?
Not as many people in here. Even though a lot of people.
Plus incentive financing too. Right, okay.
This is what I wanted to see, this is.
Yeah, so here's each TAD, and the TAD is the percentage of the tax sizes. And what you might say is the mall, how is it, you know, some of these, how is it less now? But the fact is the value of the mall was moving backwards, right?
Mhm.
It was losing value, basically. So you can see that between 2020 and 2024 until the new things are built, in which case the value will go up again.
So in East Downtown as well, huh?
And that 5.8 number that we started with, that was the total
The total.
of the tax. rate.
Because remember, there's a rule at the state level that all of the parcels that are bound up in TADs within a community cannot be in excess of 10% of the total, the digest.
What about, I mean, I understand the mall, but what about East Downtown? Why has that gone down so much?
Maybe some, yeah.
Well, these numbers are really just percentages, so there's so many variables around the
Yeah.
entire community to, you know, other areas can rise and fall. I think kind of the neat thing about this number is back in 2020, it was 5.8%, and now it's 5.7%. So they really are, it's even closer than that. So the TADs, even though some are going up, and some are going down as far as the percentage of the tax digest, they're still all kind of floating around. They're sort of maintaining with the rest of the human.
Really means that those areas haven't gotten developed yet.
Yes.
And we did roll back the millage rate last year, not this year, but last year.
We did.
Because I remember that was one of the discussion
Yeah.
points, that it would affect the TAD. We were building these, the projections are based on the millage rate being where it is when you are assuming, doing the analysis, right? So that if you change the millage rate, then you're not gonna, if you lower the millage rate, you're not gonna have as much money coming in, but that's.
I don't think that would impact this because the millage rate affects each property in a similar way, right?
Yeah, I don't think it would affect
Yeah, so
this
it
element
would-
of like the TAD digest generally. It was just
Yeah.
the point that I think Carol was getting at was
Mhm.
raised up, I think, with regard to the mall agreement specifically,
Yeah.
because that agreement involves a projection around increase in value over 30 years on that property. And so if we're not collecting as much of a
Right.
rate on that property as we previously were calculating that on, then we might not actually have the amount available to pay for what we said we would in that agreement.
And Lexington and Newton Bridge are places where there is significant new
Investment.
development in there, so.
But I think this is really more of an indicator.
Yeah.
So our whole tax digest as a whole has grown significantly.
Look faster in these areas.
Since 2020, base values created. So it's just the percentage of what those parcels represented on the whole.
Okay.
But I mean, we're only 4 years into it also. These areas really haven't started to really get redeveloped. Be interested to see this in 6 years, see how much it's changed.
Yeah.
So 2.8 million, about 2.9 million is the total amount that we've collected in the TAD funds, all those added together.
From the previous
in 4
slides.
years.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the process to amend or to add a new TAD. So this is the process that we went through at the front end, but y'all might not have known it was happening until it landed on the agenda, right? So, identify areas in need and eligibility, so that goes back to what Daniel was initially saying about underdeveloped infrastructure, blight, things like that. Sometimes it's an interested developer, we talked about that for potentially a project-based TAD in the future, and then the but-for test, for each area, I think that's important, like, would development be occurring anyway in these areas if it weren't for the TADs? And then you either create a new redevelopment plan or you amend the existing redevelopment plan, which involves data gathering, updating the plan, anticipating potential revenues, projects that might be in that area, either a redevelopment project or a greenfield that might be promising potential costs, engaging the Board of Education in the process of consideration in case they want to jump into one of the existing TADs that they're not currently participating in, or if they want to participate in a new TAD that's being considered. Make sure the TADs don't exceed that 10% that we just talked about. The adoption process, there's public hearings, public input. The mayor and commission, you're actually voting upon the redevelopment plan. And then the Board of Education would also vote. The next step is that, the redevelopment plans and data goes to the Georgia Department of Revenue. They go through a review process and then certify the tax allocation increment. We already kind of know determine collection and the management of the TAD increments with the tax commissioner and the Board of Assessors and with finance for the management of it. And then termination of a TAD is going through the evaluation process and then the payment of any outstanding debts, and then the return of those funds to the general fund.
I do have a question. This is bringing this back to me. When we were going through the mall redevelopment, the mall TAD work, I had this, lightning shift of this. I was paying attention to all of this when this was going on, when I wasn't yet on the commission, got on the commission. And, we talk about like for the affordable housing, for the, all these different things, or the sidewalks, or the slowing down the traffic. And that made it sound to me like the development, this is my original understanding. The original understanding was that this TAD money was going to be used to build infrastructure, right? Just like, in a sense, like SPLOST dollars, right? So there's where I was first time, and some of that's coming back right now. Then when we were in the mall redevelopment, and I remember having this like discussion with Blaine at one point where I was like, wait a second, the TADs are really there to help private development happen, like at the mall, where we're helping with, some of the infrastructure, and that it's really a public-private development tool versus use it for public infrastructure in general, the way we do sidewalks or parks or something else. And so now I'm a little confused because some of this gets me back to the original thing where I'm like, oh, we got this extra money, we can use it for sidewalks, we can use it for, whatever else. So I'm probably at a point where could be both. But would anyone like to comment on that?
I'm gonna let Ilka answer, because we've talked about this quite a bit. But
Okay.
let me just say that the way other folks do it, TIFs,
In other states.
in other places, yes, the increment goes to debt service.
That helps the developer make payments.
Yeah, but Ilka and I've had a lot of conversation about this.
So most communities, the benefit of a TAD is actually the development. In Athens, we've sort of split it, which is why we don't have a lot of developers that are applying for our TADs. Because when a developer comes in, they have a project that is planned out. They know what they want to build. They have their financing laid out. They've already done some assessment of the site, what is possible there. they've thought about like, who might some tenants be? What makes sense for this area, for the number of car counts, for the incomes that are here. If we build housing, we think we'll be able to fill it, so we won't have vacancies. The way our process is, not only asks the developer to build what the developer has intended to build or has kind of a planned idea to build, but also a lot of other things that don't really fit into their plan for what they're planning to build. And so that's why I think we have not seen a lot of action on our TADs, is because a developer sort of has a process for how they build something. And we're asking them not only to go through that process, but to pay a lot of money and go through a lot of uncertainty to build not only the thing they want to build and are financed to build and ready to build and have the experience to build, but a whole other set of things that really don't fit.
Well, it's because it seems to me like it's sort of like, with the exception of the mall, where we're kind of saying, we have these areas, and if someone comes around and redevelops in here, we're gonna get some money off of this to do other things that the county needs.
It's not promoting development.
It's not promoting development, it's profiting from it, and, you know, so it's like, say for example, the affordable housing thing that we just passed last night, which is in a TAD. And the guy
And he made it
saying,
very clear.
but he made it very clear that he was only doing that
The gas
because he
station,
was using the gas station.
yeah.
Where in another situation,
You could-
he could have said, we could have said, well, we'll, you know, you can use the TAD money to create this, like, we'll make some contract, whatever.
$54,000.
Yeah. Recognizing Jesse rather than talking myself.
So I think the gas station's an interesting example, right? Because if instead they went the TAD route, they might not have needed the gas station to cover the cost. They could have
Yeah.
used TAD money to cover the cost of affordable housing, which is one of the four
Yeah,
things.
that was the point.
Yeah.
You made it.
And so, but there's a way that you frame this that I just wanna like make sure we're on the same page on. It's like, we're not creating, it's not like TADs give us more money. It's just designating where the money is held. And then it gives us a different way to use.
Right,
that
right.
money,
No, yes,
Right,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so like, I
It's
think
for
there's
the
maybe
area,
this idea
for
like,
the
oh, we
area.
created TADs and now there's like more money for infrastructure, but there's only more money for infrastructure theoretically if you've used the TAD to incentivize private development, that then makes that property and other properties around it worth more.
Right,
The money from that property is just gonna go back into the private development, that's how they got there in the first place. But the other ones around it might be worth more as a result, and then that could be used for
Right,
infrastructure. So like the hotel, the Hyatt Hotel is a good example where like, not $10 million, but the tax collected off that $10 million value increase. That hotel was already there, and since it was in the TAD, now that increase in value, which may or may not be due to other developments happening around it, can be used within the TAD. And what we're really doing actually is constraining ourselves to say that that money that's collected on that property has to be used in this area.
right. But it is using the money is going to infrastructure, where if it went into the general fund, we spend most of our money on salaries and benefits and all those other things there. We are restricting its use, so therefore, assuming we don't take money away somewhere else, we're having more money for. some
Yeah,
of these things.
so we're restricting its use to be used in that TAD
Yeah, yeah.
area, but it's not like we're giving ourselves new money or a new ability to use it, because if it was just sitting in the general fund, like
Yeah.
any money in the general fund, we as the commission could decide to put it towards infrastructure.
And it's not driving development in that. A developer still wanna take the risk in that area.
Yeah, for them, it is a risk, right? Because they have to pay an application fee up front. They have to pay their attorney and our attorney and go through this process that usually takes several
Oh,
months.
to apply for the money is the risk. Okay, come on. Okay.
Well, you know, so they have to fill out a TAD application. There's a fee for the TAD application. Then as we go through the TAD application process, this community benefits agreement is drafted using our attorney and their attorney. So they have to pay two attorneys to do that. Their project is debated and discussed and picked apart in a public forum. You know, that's just
Right,
an
right.
objective truth, it is. Then it goes in front of a TAD advisory committee for approval or denial. And then it comes to the mayor and commission for more discussion in a public forum and approval or denial. And And that's a lot of uncertainty for a developer, right? I mean, once they come and they know where they want to build something, they usually have their financing already lined up, but there are these extra steps then. And other items, community benefits that they're being asked to now build as part of the project that they had already sort of lined their ducks up for. It's a lot, it introduces a lot of uncertainty to the development process, for better or for worse.
Well, yeah, for better or for worse, because, but for the test.
Mhm.
Highway, what would that be, 29? It is growing organically without government intervention.
Right.
Yes.
It is, I used to live out there. I remember how dark it was, no lighting or anything. So, you know, I don't know if that was, you know, a missed opportunity because golly, we hadn't had in that area.
There wasn't sewer
Well,
out
but we're still getting
there. That's
the
why,
tax.
that's why there
I
wasn't.
mean, if the benefit
But,
of that is to spur development.
but when Kroger came out there and whatever they
But
did,
there wasn't any sewer out there. That land was, sewer, that land had been for sale for a long time and people, but there was no sewer.
but when Kroger came, didn't that open the floodgates for sewer over there? 'Cause
No,
that-
they put sewer in there for the Kroger.
And that's my
That's
point.
what.
Yeah.
That's my whole point, that now when Kroger came and put in, I ain't gonna say they didn't need us, they didn't use us, but now it has spurred,
Yeah, it's amazing.
development out there.
So, you said the percentage, like, we're the only one that uses a percentage that goes towards infrastructure and not incentivize the developer. Is that what you were saying?
No, what I'm saying is our community requires a set of benefits in addition to the actual development. So the purpose of a TAD generally is to create a spur for development to occur
Okay.
that then raises your tax digest and attracts other businesses around it, right? The way that we have TAD set up is, it's not just the development that we're asking the developer to do, we're asking them to do a whole nother set of things that they may not be prepared to do or even want to do. And then there's a lot of uncertainty wrapped around that in the fact that it takes several months for it to go through the process. They have to pay for our attorneys, their attorneys, to create an agreement to do things in addition to what they initially were intending to build. And then they get to the end of the process and they don't know if they'll get the funds or not, but they're already out money for both attorneys, and their project has been through a lot of discussion and debate in a public forum, whereas if they were just gonna develop it, if it was by right, they would do it, or maybe they would go through planning commission if they had a planned development, but it's a very different experience for a developer. I'm not defending or anything, I'm just sort of pointing out
Laying it
some
out.
realities as to why we've had 2 applications in 3 years for the TADs. For 6 TADs.
So the development that we approved last night,
They didn't go through the process.
It wasn't large enough, I guess, for them to justify.
They
I
just.
mean, you really gotta have something like the size of a mall. and somebody that's
still
got that
benefit,
much
right?
for-
Okay.
To justify that has the time to go through that, to wait to go through that process.
Yeah.
Cause that was one of the things, because we were pushed, because they had they needed to close.
Yeah, the closing was tied to the land acquisition deal, and not so much really about, us, well, it was a number of things. Well, let me offer this, so a lot of things can be true at once. So everything that y'all said is absolutely true. Why I bring up how other people use it as a debt coverage tool is that, look, it's right, if you have a TAD area, the general intent is to grow a blighted area. It's the whole right, it's the intent, right? So you want to incentivize someone to come in and start this thing. Someone's gonna come in and start this thing because that increment that they get is gonna go to the debt service of whatever project they're gonna build. Generally, that's how that works. Now, Commissioner Hoole's correct. At the end of the day, we could offer to put that money there with our general fund anyway. It's just, there's a little bit of certainty. So when you come in there, as a developer, generally, that this money is gonna come to my bottom line to allow me to do this. And it's a little bit
Yeah.
different. We don't do that.
And that's because that was a project base, not an area.
No, it was area based, but you can apply for it, and because that's what I started out earlier asking. You can apply for TAD funds, and they applied for TAD funds in that area.
Okay.
So so now that, the complexity is clear to me,
It's called the Penny River.
it goes back to Commissioner Hull's statement. The developer that we approved last night, why would he go through all of this? You know,
If it's so complicated.
if it's so complicated, but we still get the TAD dollars from him doing something he could build by right with the gas station. I don't think, after you've explained it to me, that would be a good sell.
The developer has to see the benefit.
But in a way, that's ideal, right? We
Right.
want people to build
We've
things with
created
no
two-
incentive.
There
That's
you
the
go.
goal of
There you
everything.
go.
We want employers to locate
No,
buildings
that's
to
not
build,
what
redevelopment to happen without
But if-
incentivizing.
But if you
it.
want people to build affordable housing,
There
they
you
usually have to
Yeah.
provide an
Right,
incentive.
right.
So
So
that,
again,
that's
an alternative way to, let's say we weren't allowing gas stations by the thing that I keep hoping will.
We only have
right?
one meeting.
And then, yeah, you only get one more month to hear that. I'm just kidding. Right? They could still have a path forward to build and make money on
Yeah.
that
Well, I'm
property
agreeing
by
with you.
applying for TAD funding, and then that would be a way for them to make money they wouldn't otherwise make as much as.
And
Right,
that's,
right.
but actually, I'm
Yeah, that's-
agreeing
It
with
would
you.
Yeah.
offset the gas station.
Right,
not
that's what
making-
I'm
yeah.
Yeah, but I'm
saying.
agreeing with you. I'm
Yeah.
saying it,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the complication of it, and he already had a gas station that could fill that gap. It
Yeah,
seems
which
to
way to
me.
go, right? It'd
Yeah.
be easier to go with the
Yeah,
gas
yeah,
station.
let me just put my gas station.
Yeah. I'm just seeing, we've had such a hearty discussion here, the time has passed. But I want to make sure that Daniel
Oh, Daniel.
finishes all his slides. So let's try to be, let's
Oh, we-
let
we
you
talked
finish
about
up this.
this.
How many more slides are there?
I think this might be the last.
Oh, okay,
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 so we're good.
okay.
So,
Yeah. But it's, I mean,
I think we
I know,
talked
but
through
most of the slides-
any boundary changes will, require the restart of the whole creation process that we just walked through. One of the risks is that you might then have non-approval or slash non-participation from the mayor and commission, Board of Ed, or the Department of Revenue may decide not to certify, the TAD costs. Mainly are in the time it takes to create and update the plan, go through legal counsel review, do the financial evaluations for either an amendment or a new TAD, the community input process. As we talked about, the base increment is reset to the current year, so you may miss out on, you don't really miss out. I mean, you only miss out in it going into the TAD fund. You would get it in the general fund anyway because it would be taxed.
Mhm.
And then, we had that last in there, which is the TAD advisory committee structure. That there's so many of them right now.
I have a question about this with the newer amending existing TADs, because we don't have we haven't had any project TADs. And so I remember what was going on with the over at Beechwood. I don't even remember what it was, but it was
Trying
something
to add
there.
property that area.
But could there have been a project-based TAD there instead of expanding the area and losing
creating a new
that?
tab.
Create a new project-based TAD adjacent to an already existing TAD. Right, I mean, there's no problem doing that, is there?
As long as you can make the case that it fits the rules for a
But-
TAD in the Florida code, like underdeveloped infrastructure.
But
so on.
you were saying blight means it's buildings over 40 years old.
No, that's just.
Well,
one.
that is just-
Well,
yeah,
the
deteriorating
Well,
buildings.
the Beechwood one was, the first rendition that we got was about piping and deteriorating of the pipes.
Yeah,
We didn't find out about the housing piece
Right,
until
yeah.
later. But when it first came to us, it was about replacing, and I'm sure those pipes in Beechwood are old.
okay.
So, but that was the first rendition, which would fit the infrastructure guidelines.
Okay, but here's an example too, that was just brought forward to me, that Clark Gardens on the east side off of Research Varnish
Initial.
is not, and Carriage Lane is not in a TAD. There's some rumor that it's being sold. I don't know where, I was actually gonna ask you a question after the meeting about, because you're an expert on these things, but let's say it is sold. And it's, we got all this development going on over there that's like across the way with the Deagle property that's kind of, pricey, that's not affordable housing. But we have this place that has been affordable housing, but it's run down, it's sold, let's say it's out of the HUD requirements, I don't even know what they are. But let's say that's run its course, so someone could buy the whole thing and redevelop it into something fancy. But if we had it could theoretically be a project TAD for that redevelopment that would allow someone to make it into affordable housing. Is that correct or not?
They would have to opt into they would have to opt into that, right?
They'd have to apply for
We
it.
wouldn't create, this, okay, and then correct me if I'm wrong, there's not an existing area tab there. We
Right,
have not
right.
gone and created.
Right, but a project TAD, yeah,
Developer would have to apply for that.
right. Do we even have a way that a developer can apply for a project TAD?
I think they would probably just go through the TAD application process and then we would have to add.
But we don't like announce it,
I
like,
would say it's part of this discussion here, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
And then.
yeah.
Well, thinking about Clark Gardens, it's adjacent, right? It's Clark Gardens, there's two apartment
No,
complexes.
it's,
I know there's one.
no, that's.
It's the one that's like right here.
Well, it's probably the same company,
Yeah.
this is right.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, but it's the same company, because they might have,
But under our existing guidelines, it would not be beneficial for them to do it within an existing TAD because we would make them do all these other extra things.
Well, they would have to do the same thing if it was
Theoretically,
a
right, yeah.
project.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So, but if it'd be better if it was out where they could come and say, to try to get financial aid to try to help developers, is that right?
Well, if we had a process that was streamlined.
And that's my next question. The process, is that state, policy, the complexity of it, or do each area have their own process?
So the process of establishing a TAD is
In that thing.
outlined in the Redevelopment Powers Act, and
Okay.
the steps that we have to go through, so that's.
Subsequent step.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah.
What be
TAD
that?
application.
So to answer your question, Commissioner Porter, Dr. Powell's right, where the state lays it out how you get to a certain point. But after you get to that point, we add on the additional process.
And that's what's up for discussion.
Some of it, yeah. Commissioner Hul had a point, and
So I just, you had your things to consider slide, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, Mrs. Ryan.
And I guess I just wanna, this is not at all to discount what you're saying, Ilka, about like how what we do here is more complicated than elsewhere, and there's maybe something to why we're not getting as many applications. But having been deeply embedded in the mall negotiations, I do wanna say that like, I think we got real benefit out of that process, given that it did survive. I mean, the transfer station, the childcare facility, it's gonna have to be part of that, the youth development, youth force thing that's gonna be over there, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things in there. In addition to the affordable housing, but also the like back and forth about when we say affordable housing, what AMI level and getting in at 60% instead of 80. Like all of that was part of that negotiation. So maybe there's a way for us to make that negotiation process clearer, better, more efficient, so that it's not so terrible for everyone.
That's one of the reasons that we did. Where am I? Sorry, this process, that's,
Yeah,
so we were in the middle of the mall, and I remember saying to Nikki, like, we need to do community input with all of the TADs, so that when a developer arrives and says, I wanna build a project, we can say to them, this is what the community has said they wanna see in this TAD, and these are the things you should be thinking about as you're putting together your TAD application for the communities, because I agree with you, those benefits, they're important. But, so that's why we've been going through this whole community engagement process, and that's how we came up with it, was because in the mall, the difficult part was that process happened in the middle of this larger
Right.
negotiation, which really, in a way, there's no judgment about timing, but it's just a fact. It slowed the development of the CBA down because we didn't have it already done.
Totally.
Now we're gonna have it already done and ready to go, where the community has already said, like, these are things we wanna see. And then the committee, the advisory committee, and y'all have said, okay, yeah, we see this and this, you know.
Yeah, if you go back to that slide that had those
Sorry.
points that we were looking at, like the goals, the goal points.
Sorry.
4 goals.
Yeah, the 4 goals.
Oh, I think that might have been.
It's like the second.
You're right at
Hold
the
on.
beginning, it was right at the beginning.
Affordable housing, youth development.
Infrastructure.
Right, but we
Economic.
don't have anything in there.
Slide.
Sorry, yeah, it's okay, but. no,
So,
sorry. Yeah,
There,
Okay, sorry.
is that it? No, that's not even.
I don't
No,
know.
it's not, sorry,
It's after that. One more.
Slide
Okay.
7.
but it was up towards the.
there,
top.
there we go, September. Yeah, so,
History slide.
but economic development partnerships, I guess what, I'm just saying, like, if you weren't gonna have a youth center or affordable housing, like, could you, but you were just wanting to build something that was gonna help spur development, like your
Just things I could develop.
just economic development in general. Would that count under that? Like, I wanna do like the new, like, okay, that Kroger development around the corner from me, let's say it was going from scratch and we wanted to put it on actually in your tad, where the Piggly Wiggly is, right? And we just
Get
wanted
rid of
to
that
do that, right? And it wasn't gonna have affordable housing, it was just gonna be like the same thing as Kroger's over there. Could you do that? Would that count as economic development partnership?
Well, y'all defined the 4 goals, so if y'all think that it suits
Okay.
that, then it's a good thing.
Okay. Okay,
I wish you would put
Jesse,
those down
Peter.
locally.
Oh, yeah, good, good.
I just would like to see, not in
Bullet
that
it.
paragraph, bullet it.
So if I may,
Yes.
I just want to kind of finish what I was trying to get at before. And I appreciate
sorry.
you raising up kind of what's been changed here. I think that's really encouraging. But just moving forward, and we're thinking about what to change. I think it is valuable to maintain some kind of point at which there can be some kind of additional negotiation or discussion around what that community benefits agreement looks like. And why I think that that is valuable is because what the community identifies as needs will evolve sometimes much more quickly than however frequently you're gonna go through that process. And what they identify as priorities might differ site to site or project to project. You know, what we wanna see on the west side might be different than what we wanna see at the mall. A good example of this would be that neighborhood who's got a bunch of parcels in the mall district was super concerned about the flooding they experienced from the runoff. And so all that stormwater mitigation, that's also a huge expensive part of that mall agreement, was addressing that concern. That's probably not gonna rise to the top of the list if you're just looking at like the west side needs. And then, of course, any community engagement process has its limits around who's involved and whether like, you know, you've got all the people who are gonna be most directly affected, you know, raised up. And when you distill everyone's priorities down to a list that people can make sense reading, you probably won't get to the level of detail that's like 60 versus 80% AMI, right? And so I just say all that to say, like, the value of that more detailed negotiation, I think, is useful. And one of the things that I and my fellow committee members were looking for when we were in that is, like, I think if we were involved in the discussions earlier, it wouldn't have been as messy and rushed feeling when we got to the point we got to in that meeting. And this isn't to say we should have done it differently, but we're learning as we go, right? It's just to say, like, moving forward, how we could do it differently. And I do want to point out that that's the one of the 6 TADs that the school district is in, which is where we're getting like 3 times as much money into these things. And they thought it was really important to be involved in those discussions and sooner. And so, like, if we want to try to turn these TADs into TADs where the school district and their large amount of tax money is also on the table, I think we need to figure out how this process is going to involve representatives from the school district at the table early enough in the process to feel like they're getting a say in what comes out of it, or they probably won't want to be involved. So I hope that's makes
No, I
sense.
think that's excellent. One of the communities that we've benchmarked against, looking at,
Already did it.
like, oh, you're amazing.
Yeah, oh,
For TAD process is actually the city of Gainesville, and the way they do it is they have 2 TADs, they just sunsetted one of them. They're both close to their downtown, But their TAD committee, and I'm not saying ours needs to look the same, but they have the economic development director sits on it, the city manager sits on it, the county manager sits on it, the school superintendent sits on it. So that they do have that right from the beginning, from when an application kind of comes in, they have the relevant bodies that are contributing taxes that would go to a particular project.
I guess my thought is, and Jesse's right, and we saw that last night. People being involved early in the process with the CDO and T-Splosh we passed. So I guess across the board, Manager Jones, I'm just saying, we probably need to look at all of our processes on when people on board with things that is going to impact the community. It's not just the TAD, it's not just it's all of that. And who and how we get people involved. I think though, I was really kind of negative about, my next question. Whatever the state regulates or policy, are you saying the things that we add on locally can be changed?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, because that is probably where I'm very interested in. I did not know all of those hoops and hurdles existed, so I hope that's going to be, I'll just turn it over to you. You guys already figured it out.
John heads Commissioner Cole.
Just two questions, go back to the goals.
Gosh.
All right, so the fourth goal, it says CCSD and youth development, so it's for CCSD to get involved, is that a goal? Explain that.
So when we were first doing this, when we were talking with this commission at the time, because we were really trying to get CCSD's participation in these tabs, one of the goals originally was to have some funds dedicated towards of the tab. Like, we really want to see youth development being a priority here for how we spend and use these tab funds. But because we were also trying to involve CCSD, and particularly with the mall tab especially, if there were properties to where CCSD properties were included in the tab, which I don't remember there being a ton, I think there's a couple, and at least one of them, that the tab funds could potentially be used to help also with public infrastructure as it pertains to those schools.
So if there was a school in there that you use.
So the money would go to the school district.
Not necessarily, it would have to be a property within a tab area boundary, so the funds still have to be used in that specific.
But to the school district property within that.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Only two TAD areas have any CCSD parcels. Newton Bridge has 2 parcels and North Avenue has 1.
But so the mall thing is that's kind of a separate deal because we brought the CCSD in to be able to get some of their funding.
CCSD is really interested in a TAD, specifically the mall TAD, because if we add housing, that means we're adding potentially students.
And so their participation in a TAD also, so they're giving part of their increment increase. So it's not just our increment
Right.
increase for the mall TAD, they're also buying in, but giving their increment as well. But it's totally optional, but to Nikki's point, that's why we, regardless of their participation, we are required under law to give them a school impact analysis to let them know, here's an estimated number of students that you're likely gonna see in your schools as a result of development.
That's what I'm wondering if that's the right way. Is that a goal?
It's a goal now.
It is, okay, so
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me what you're questioning whether that is a goal.
Yeah.
Or, right, but, which is just what you said. But I do want to wrap this up, because we are coming on 2:30 here. And as, I don't know if Commissioner Thornton was about to say this, but she might have been saying like, I was like, what are we gonna be doing, especially TADs? But yeah, we're into these TADs, aren't we?
Well, I
We
really
like
was
it.
gonna tell you, this was a waste of time, but
I-
now
yeah,
I see some light at the end of
At the end of the tunnel.
at the end of the tunnel.
And so I'm gonna ask you all to, make some, figure out how to move forward here. But I think one of the things that would be helpful for us is delineating the part of this, the part of our process that's state required versus Athens-Clarke County required, and what the restrictions are, so that we clarify that for ourselves in here. Because when we're looking at processes, if we've made up the processes ourselves here in Clark County, we can revise them and thank
And
you,
it sounds
Daniel.
like some kind of proposal for how a private developer could come to us.
For a
to
project,
apply
yes.
For this project that's outside of an existing TAD boundary.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're very new in this. We're only 4 years in. So you said Gainesville, they have one that's about to sunset, so they've been in it for 20 years. Is that right?
I'm not sure that they've been in it for 20 years. I think they feel that they've achieved. I mean, if you think about when you're coming into Gainesville, that whole area right across, I think it's Jesse Jewell Parkway, that was a TAD. So I think they feel like the transformation and the momentum is there, and so they.
Well, that's what, like, where we can see what other communities, Gainesville, you were looking at how they're set up, the stuff outside of what the state mandates, and gauge their success, if it's been successful, because like you said, we're too early in it to really know. I mean, we've had it for 4 years, we got $2.8 million. We don't know if it's working or not. Sure.
Well, sidebar conversation at ACC, Gene's conference, TADS came up, and it was what, people were kind of negative. And I wasn't in those conversations. It was like a sidebar thing.
So maybe some comparables down the line.
Yeah.
We use
So
some-
we'll come back with what state required and what we do. We'll come back with a draft process for how a developer would apply for a project-based TAD. And then we'll also have at least Gainesville, their process laid out so we can see that.
Another
Consideration, good, G might be a good reference. Maybe they know about other TADs too. They were talking about it.
Greenville,
Okay,
you know, what things.
So this,
and one more from,
this request only makes sense if other people here agree, but if staff could come back with a recommendation for like revising or clarifying the process for when and how the mark or whatever equivalent of the mark would be for other TADs, if we get the school district at the table, would be involved in a negotiation. Does that make sense?
Say it one more
So
time.
the mark is that mall area redevelopment committee, right? The one that had the school district members and the commissioners there, kind of that second layer of negotiation after the TAD, the TAC, right?
Mhm.
So many acronyms. And so this idea of like, when and how would that conversation or that negotiation begin and what would it involve? You've kind of mapped out how you've got this new way of getting community input on the front end, but that more detailed discussion around a specific project or a specific application, when does that begin and what's being
Yeah.
discussed? I think we benefit from having.
If the school board
mapped out.
opts in, how does that alternative route play into the process?
Correct. And so I think it's, right now you could just say like, next time there's something for the mall area, what happens with the
We
mark?
need not supposed to.
And then that can be our model for if we can get the school district at the table for other TADs.
And what she said about Gainesville, having the school superintendent on the front end on the TAD application committee. Is that what they were doing?
Well, they also only have one committee for their TADs.
That's right.
so that, we'll get that in, maybe we can get that in our comparables, some of these things like.
Then you have a
Committees,
set of
structures,
folks
process.
who really understand the process. Maybe there's a couple of people from each of the TADs, so that each TAD is represented in that group. Yeah.
And you wouldn't have the
Just-
problems not having the forum either.
Bullet points on
We've got too many people to try
everything
to
that
get.
was kind of crazy.
Yeah. That's
Like they know what was crazy.
okay, so do we have a motion?
But no, I can.
Let's just finish this up. Do we have a motion to,
Oh,
well, actually, before we do that, forum next meeting, which would be on December, fifth, and, you know, we probably wanna,
Fifth.
like do something special, cause it'll be Commissioner Hull's last meeting. So,
Cookies.
cookies, decoration committee, things like that.
oh, you know I like doing stuff like that, Jesse.
All right, December 5th, okay, so everyone put that on there. And,
Be here.
yeah, well,
You're gonna miss the celebration.
yeah, okay, so well, so,
I'll get him some cookies.
okay. So, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Sorry. I'm sick.
All in-
Letting John get in.
All in favor?
Ah.
Aye, let's get out of here.
Was it great? Thanks.